I'm 𝗬𝗶𝗄𝗄𝗄, a recognized thought leader in the Microsoft Dynamics community and a Microsoft MVP for business applications. Welcome to the Get Your New View podcast. Keep listening to learn how we work with frustrated Business Central and NAV users who struggle to use their system and find the answers that they need. We teach them to truly understand how the system can support their business processes to make immediate and lasting improvements. As a result, they get more done in less time, make better business decisions, and even love their system. Our next session is going to start with some specific things that you should know from the 2024 Wave 2 release from 𝗬𝗂𝗿𝗄𝗄. She's going to be highlighting some specific concepts related to 1099s, subscription billing, and the new search method. Sit tight and we'll get her session started.
Welcome to Stuff You Should Know About the 2024 Wave 2 release. What I've done for this session is I've pulled out 3 of the larger new features or updates so that I could spend a little bit more time talking about each of these. The subscription billing and the 1099s are pretty in-depth and more complex as new features. So what I've done in this session is kind of just given an overview of what you'll need to do for the setup and use of it, but note that they are, again, pretty in-depth, so you might need to spend a little bit more time digging into these on your own and helping get them set up for your company or customers that you work with. Searching in list pages is one of the new features that is a change to the way that the search is normally done in lists. With this new release, we have the ability to change the data search method. And for the new search, the modern search, as they call it, it's starting with the main tables. So things like customers, contacts, items, and GL accounts. And you'll see in my example that I use one of these tables. So you'll see how you can find out if this new modern search is available on each list and how to use it. Moving forward, more tables will be added, such as purchase and sales documents, projects, GL entries, etc. You can turn on or enable the modern search in feature management. So this is something that either your partner or your IT department or admin can assist with, but it does need to be enabled to be able to use this modern search. It will eventually become the default method in a future release. And if you'd like to learn more about this and the dates, you can go ahead and click on that link that I have below. This is just a screenshot of what you will see if you have the modern search available on a list page. This is a screenshot from the items list, and if I look on my page search or my list search, there's a little drop-down arrow, and it shows that we can either use the modern search, which is faster, and that's what's checked currently, or we can use the legacy search, which is what we are used to. I also wanted to record a short demo video on the different results that we might get by using the modern search versus the legacy search. So let's take a look at that. We do need to make sure that this feature is enabled. So in feature management, I'll look for use optimized text search in lists, and I can see that it is currently enabled for all users. So we can go ahead and we can try out this new feature. On my items list, I am going to go to my page list search, and I can see that there's the modern search, which is currently enabled, and legacy search. Let's go ahead and let's just type in chair. And I can see that with the modern search, I get some results, and I can see that little magnifying glass is indicating that it's searching on number and description. So I can see visibly which fields are being searched. I'm going to go ahead and change to my legacy search, and I can see it does add an additional search response because I can see that it's also looking in the item category code field, and we had a match. So that little magnifying glass icon will show you where is being searched. Let's go ahead and let's add that we are looking for a red chair. And with my legacy search, I do not get any results. It's looking for an exact match to that. In modern search, I do get 2 results because it is looking for anywhere in those 2 fields where there is red or chair. So it's not looking for that exact match. Subscription billing is something that I almost think of as a new module rather than just a new feature. And my first exposure to seeing a demo of subscription billing was at the Summit North America 2024 conference when Microsoft had their keynote presentation and they were demoing some of the new features. Microsoft showed creating the recurring subscription billing invoices, and to me it seemed pretty simple and straightforward, but I think what I didn't see was the setup that may have gone into this. So as I've explored this feature a little bit more and tried using it, I think I underestimated the amount of work that would go into just learning what that setup and that background looks like to get this module up and working. We've always had recurring billing as a feature in Business Central through the ability to create recurring sales lines and then create recurring sales invoices. The new subscription and recurring billing module is much more robust than what we've had available previously. Here I've included a link to Microsoft Learn and just a few notes about the background and setup of subscription billing. So the three main components of subscription billing is the ability to manage contracts for both vendor and customer, service objects, as well as service commitments. This is where functionality in the past has maybe fallen a little bit short to be able to incorporate these with the recurring billing. Next, you'll see a screenshot of what that recurring billing page looks like in Business Central, and you can see that it is definitely more robust than just our recurring sales invoices. So we have billing proposals, documents, and as mentioned, we'll also have those contracts, service commitments, etc., that all play into this final subscription billing. This chart is from learn.microsoft, and I think it does a good job of visually laying out the different components of the subscription billing. You can see that it is a little bit complex, but I like how it starts with the master data, and it shows what setup might be needed to be able to make this whole flow of subscription billing work. It also gives examples of what things like service commitments might be. Next, we have the sales, and this incorporates the different types of sales documents and would also take into consideration the customer or vendor contract as well as that service object. Finally, we have the finance piece of it, which really is that actual billing to the customer, which takes into consideration all of the master data and sales setup that is happening in the background. We can see that we get invoices either for vendors or customers, and we can use deferrals to properly recognize the expense or revenue for these billings. These are just a few more points about the subscription billing that Microsoft has promoted. This feature or module is included in the Essential license, and you can use it for contracts for recurring billing for items and services, different schedules. It can be usage-based, it can be automated. We can integrate deferrals, which would help us recognize revenue properly, and we can also take into consideration any contract updates. There are also some standard reports, but as you can see, most of them, as mentioned, are available as Power BI reports. As I prepared for this part of the session, I didn't want to just give a quick demo video showing the end result of the subscription billing because I feel like that might be a little bit misleading to not show all of the steps that are involved in the setup. And as I was testing through this functionality, I found it much more complex than I anticipated it to be, because it does include many robust features, but I will say it's most likely not going to be just a quick setup. It is something that will involve a little bit more time commitment to make sure that all of the setup pieces are there to properly get this module to work for you. So instead, what I've done is I've compiled some different resources with additional information. First is Microsoft Learn. Microsoft Learn has a very good layout to explain the different components of this new module. Here on my screen, you can see that they have an overview of the subscription billing, and they do talk about the main elements, contracts, service objects, and commitments. They talk about the flow and include this graph. There's also some additional links down here as far as managing the contracts, service objects, and commitments, as well as recurring billing. There's also some training if you're looking to do the training aspect of it. The second resource is 𝗬𝗓𝗄 training. It's my understanding that Microsoft purchased this extension or this application from the German company 𝗬𝗓𝗄, and they know everything about it, how to properly train on it. So if you are looking for formalized training from the creator, you can use this link here and you can sign up for their training. Finally, I came across this blog post as I was scrolling through LinkedIn just to see what people were saying about this new module. In looking through LinkedIn, I was able to come across the product owner for 𝗬𝗓𝗄, and I found a post that he shared with a step-by-step tutorial of the subscription billing. So that is what I've linked in the PowerPoint slide, and it contains a very, very detailed layout of what needs to be done in order to fully take advantage of this module. There is quite a large amount of detail in this blog. So you can see it keeps going and going and going, and it's wonderful because there are screenshots for everything. So I would highly recommend that if you are interested in seeing if the subscription and recurring billing module can work for you or your customers, that you take a look at these different resources to help you get started and to give you some more background information on the setup needed. Additionally, just because this new module or feature is available doesn't mean that you have to use it if what you're doing currently with the existing functionality is working just fine. Before I go more in depth on the 1099 module, I want to mention that as I was testing through some of the 1099 setup and usability so that I could put together this presentation, I did come across a few things that I believe to be bugs. And I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding everything that Microsoft had put out there correctly. So I did put together a post on LinkedIn with a specific question, and you'll see that I will cover that in this demo as well. I did get a response from Microsoft on the LinkedIn post, and I will share that response from 𝗬𝗬𝗄𝗏 at the end of this 1099 section, because I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of any potential bugs or issues that exist with this functionality, as well as when they might want to start testing through and using it. I do really like that in improving the functionality for 1099s, Microsoft has also added quite a bit of additional articles and information on the 1099. Not only is it covered on how to use the functionality, but there's also a page on what 1099s are and who might need them. So that link is at the bottom, and then there are 3 additional articles that are all 1099 related as far as how to do the 1099 setup using the module and then filing and printing the reports as well. So thank you, Microsoft, for putting this detailed information out there on how to use the module. This is a screenshot of the tax form introduction, and as mentioned, it gives a brief overview of who needs to file the 1099 forms and the different common types of forms. It's important to note that before you can use this new 1099 functionality, you would need to enable this feature on the feature management page. This is something that should be done by your partner or IT or admin department. Once you activate this new feature on feature management, you cannot revert back to the old 1099 functionality. So because there are some existing issues with this that Microsoft seems to be working through, I would recommend that if you do want to test through this, you are only doing it in a sandbox environment or a completely separate demo database. In feature management, I am going to look for the feature update for 1099 forms. And what I need to do is I need to go ahead and enable this for all users. And when I do that, I'm going to get a notification that you cannot turn this off and that we strongly recommend you do it in a sandbox or copy of production data first. Now we'll go ahead and enable the feature and we get a little wizard. So let's go ahead and let's walk through this wizard together. We can either create new setup or transfer existing data. So I'm going to choose the option to transfer the existing data because we already have the setup that exists. This is not a new company. And my first reporting year will be 2024. So after we've selected these options, you can always read more about the detail on what they are. And we'll go ahead and select next. So I can schedule this or I can run it immediately. So now that we've completed these, we'll go on to the next, and 2 options here to collect the details for the line and should we protect the TIN number for the vendors or company or should we not. Keep in mind this setup can always be modified at a later date. This is just a wizard for that initial setup. So let's go ahead and click next, and our IRS Forms Setup is completed. So we can select finish and we can go to the IRS reporting periods as well as all of the other setups, and we can see that this is now enabled. This is just a screenshot of what that feature management page will look like when that functionality is enabled. Keep in mind that you cannot revert to the old functionality once this is enabled. Now, there is quite a bit of setup that is needed for the new 1099 functionality. So what I wanted to do is just kind of walk you through some of it and put together some screenshots. There's an IRS Forms Setup page that doesn't have a lot of details, but you can always go back there and you can modify whether you're protecting the PIN, collecting details for the line, as well as what that email content setup is going to look like. As remember, with this new functionality, we will have the ability to email our 1099 copies to the recipients directly from Business Central. There are also IRS 1099 reporting periods, and you do need to set up a reporting period for each new year. You can also see the forms in that period, and if I drill into that further, I can see the different types of forms and the box count on each of those. The IRS 1099 form boxes shows the different types of form boxes as well as the minimum reportable amount. Now, this hasn't really changed too much from the old functionality. As I did mention, you will need to create a new reporting period for each year. This is something that I would recommend you just make part of your normal year-end process. When you're creating your new accounting periods for each year, you can create that IRS reporting period as well. Now, if we look at the vendor setup and the options on the vendor card, with the old or the existing way, we had 3 fields. We had a 1099 code, a federal ID number, and a tax ID type. With the new functionality, we have some additional fields. So we still have the tax identification type and the federal ID number, but we now have an IRS reporting period, the form number, the box number, and fields as well for the email functionality. There is an option to suggest this vendor setup, but I'm not sure how accurate it is based on the existing information that's in the system. So for me, in a demo test database with not a lot of detail or existing setup, it was hard to tell if this new setup was going to take a lot of manual time involvement from the user or if the system would actually do a good job of converting the existing data. I've gone ahead and I've created a new purchase invoice for First Up Consultants, and they are a 1099 liable vendor. Now, I'm just following along with the Microsoft documentation to see how the 1099 amount is recorded. The documentation states that if my posting date is within the date specified in my IRS 1099 reporting period, that it will record this as 1099 liable based on these details in the shipping and payment section. Now, I've entered 2 lines on my purchase invoice, one for consulting services, which is 1099 liable as a line, and one for office supplies, which is just a reimbursement and therefore is not 1099 liable. What I noticed, though, is that the IRS 1099 liable field that I always make sure is showing in my lines is not automatically becoming checked. Now, I don't know if this is something that I did wrong or if this is a change to the new functionality, but because the consulting services is 1099 liable, I want that box checked. And normally this box is checked by default if that vendor is 1099 liable, and I could just uncheck it for any lines that don't fall in that 1099 liability. Further, because the 1099 amount is reported based on payments made to the vendor, I'm using a payment method code of cash, which will record the payment upon posting the invoice. I'm going to go ahead and post this invoice, which should also post the payment with it. And let's go ahead and navigate to our vendor ledger entries for that vendor. Now, I've personalized my vendor ledger entries so that I can see the 4 1099 fields on my screen. Notice that the information on the 1099 liable gets recorded against the invoice line. However, the invoice does have to be paid within that period for it to show up on that form. The Microsoft documentation also states, make sure the payment is posted and applied to the invoice during the same reporting period. So I don't know if that means that if the invoice is paid in a different period, if it just won't show up in the next period's report, or if it will carry over to that next period. So that's something that I'll also need to test out. If I look at the 1099 fields I have available, there are a few more than we've had previously. So I have the reporting period, the form number, the form box number, and the reporting amount. What I notice here is that my 1099 reporting amount should only be $5,000. $5,000 was the amount of the consulting services, and $100 was the amount of office supplies reimbursement. So to me, it does not seem like that 1099 liable box is being taken into consideration when populating this 1099 reporting amount. So this is something that I am going to continue testing and potentially reach out to Microsoft on, because I think it is quite common that we have an invoice that has a mix of both 1099 and non-1099 liable amounts. Of course, I can change this amount to the $5,000 and that should be reflected on my reporting, but ideally I would be able to enter and record the correct information upfront from the purchase invoice. Let's go ahead and let's navigate to that purchase invoice. And I've gone ahead and personalized the fields on my line to show the IRS 1099 liable box. So we can see that it is in fact checked on only the first line of $5,000. So again, I don't know if this is the way that it was designed to work and that the IRS 1099 liable field on the lines is obsolete and being deprecated. But I do still feel that there needs to be a way to indicate to the system if an invoice is only partially 1099 liable. Finally, I wanted to share my post from LinkedIn to just show the response from Microsoft's product manager, 𝗬𝗬𝗄𝗏. I posed the question about the IRS 1099 liable field on the purchase lines and how it didn't become automatically checked and didn't seem to flow through to the vendor ledger entries. So I did receive a response from Alexander, and he mentioned that we should log all bugs that we find and that the new feature would in fact be ready for the calendar year of 2024, know that you are not forced to use this new feature for the 2024 year. Both the existing way and the new functionality will be supported. So I would highly recommend that if you are interested in using the new functionality for 2024, please make sure that you test this and set it up in, again, a test environment or separate demo database so that you can make sure that it is going to deliver everything that you need for your company or for companies that you support.
Harry, that was a great session. Certainly a lot there. I know that there's been some controversy in the community about the subscription billing stuff for sure. It's a big package of stuff, and it was put out in the product in a way that forced a few things. So that's a little bit of a gotcha for some folks to be aware of with the subscription billing. And I know that Microsoft is actively working on that. The 1099 stuff, man, I am always so hopeful that every year that 1099s are 100% ready, well in advance of January for the US, for us to be able to use it out of Business Central directly. And I love this product, but the end result of the 1099 stuff is I find that a lot of companies still use some kind of outside add-on to be able to collect their information and send things out there. Now, the ability to be able to automatically use the email function for 1099, that's big. So, because, we all went from the pre-printed forms and we had to stuff in envelopes to the blank forms so we could use plain paper. And it's been well overdue for us to be able to send those things electronically, not only to the IRS, they're part of the filing, but for our recipients. So I guess that's my big question for you, with the exception of the 1099 liable for the split, which is important, right? That we know that that's a problem. Is the product ready for people to be able to send 1099s from Business Central without the use of an add-on for 2024 tax filings?
I would say, in my honest opinion, for our company, for NewView, I wouldn't feel confident using it without potentially like more hours of testing. I think it's difficult, right, with the demo data that you get, because you get 5 vendors and, none of them are 1099 liable or have that history. So again, for us, I would stick with the old way of using the 1099 functionality as it's set up, and then just using, as you mentioned, an add-on to do the filing piece for me, because I know that works. I think the main thing I wasn't able to see is, with all of that history and all of those vendors and that data, how does the system actually perform in transitioning it? Because I found the setup to be very complex, and I almost felt like they overcomplicated it by putting all these different setup pieces in there. And then I think the other thing I'm a little bit confused about is you have to specify a year on the vendor card. So we're in 2024 now, but what happens in 2025? Do I change that on all of the vendor cards? Do I get prompted when I add the new year, like, hey, do you want to update this on the vendor cards? So previously, we've never really had to do that because we have a posting date in the system. I think there's just a lot of pieces of the setup that still confuse me a little bit. So I would just recommend to anyone out there, feel free to do all of the testing that you'd want, help Microsoft find the bugs as well, and, share everything that you find, because there's not a lot of information out there yet on the 1099 functionality and people having actually used it. And as you can see here too, Alexander said that the IRS integration is not quite ready yet. And I know they have, less than a month to get that together. But at the same time, that's such a difficult thing to test. How do you test sending something to the IRS without sending something to the IRS? So I guess to answer your question in short, we won't be using the new 1099 functionality, but I definitely will keep testing through it just to see how things work with actual real data.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, Microsoft always puts out their new release stuff in the spring and in the fall. And in the fall, inevitably, there's something that they put out there for 1099s, but it seems like it's never really ready for January. And once we get past January 31st, nobody cares about it until the next year. So I've worked for companies who have 8 1099s. I've worked for companies who have 8,000 1099s. With royalties with a publishing company. And I haven't found anybody who's 100% using 1099 functionality out of Business Central yet, because of course there's changes from the IRS as well. So a little frustrating. I'm slightly encouraged to see them actually, sinking some resources into it I agree that maybe they overcomplicated things a little bit.
Yeah. And I think even if it is fully ready, there's still a big training curve as far as figuring out what needs to be done. And most people just won't have that time to be able to figure everything out.
Right. Yeah. People are scrambling, to get it done in a 30-day window. And honestly, one of the things that I can advise people that they can do the best is review your 1099 information throughout the year to make sure it's recorded correctly. Because I think that, right, that's a process thing that people just don't pay attention to it until the year end when they need to actually file the documents. And one of the things that companies spend the most time on is getting their data accurate. And that's something that accountants could be doing as part of your month-end close process, is just do a quick review of what's been recorded and make sure that it's being recorded correctly throughout the year before you end up in that time crunch to get everything filed. So
yeah, that and an audit just to make sure that you have the correct tax documentation for all of your vendors so that you know who should be receiving these documents.
Awesome. 𝗬𝗶𝗄𝗿 had a question for you. How do you get to the subscription billing module? I tried the lookup, feature management, role center, etc. I don't have the new field service commitment option on the item card.
And you're in version 25 because that's the only place that it would be right now, I believe.
Yeah, that would be the biggest thing, is that if you don't have version 25, that you won't see it. So if your environment hasn't been updated.
There's different pieces of setup kind of everywhere. And I think that's what I struggled with. Like, where do I need to go? What do I need to set up? So I think I do want to spend more time on it. And I think it also would help to have kind of that more formalized training from, the people that have built it or people that have used it more extensively.
Is there anything on Microsoft Learn about it yet?
Yes. So the 3 links I shared, Microsoft Learn has extensive information. It's really good information. I think, again, for me, I just struggled to figure out how everything fit together. Like, which pieces do I need? What does it all mean? And then the Stinghammer, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but they have that training. You do have to pay for that. And then there was that really extensive article. And I think that's what I'm going to review next, because that seemed to have a really good step-by-step flow.
So, 𝗬𝗶𝗄𝗿, I don't know if that helps. She says that, they do have 25. So maybe reference some of that stuff in those links to see if there's another reason why you're not seeing that. Sometimes it's just wording. I know that in particular, there's some crossover with the naming convention with service management. So you've got to watch the words that you use in your search, that you're not ending up in service management instead of subscription billing. Good stuff and some big improvements. I think a few of those still need a little bit more work, but that's okay. So they showed up for us, and Microsoft will keep working on those until they get them exactly right. Did your team ever really get good training to understand how to use your business software? Do you think you could use more features of your software if you just knew how? Are you frustrated with inefficiency that never seems to get better? Do you suspect that there just has to be a better way, but you don't know what that is? We believe every company can benefit from increased efficiency and higher utilization of their software, and that it's possible to have fun while learning exactly how to do that. The experts at NewView Strategies work with frustrated Business Central and NAV users who struggle to use their system and find the answers they need. We teach them to truly understand how the system can support their business processes to make immediate and lasting improvements. As a result, they get more done in less time, make better decisions, and even love their system. Please contact us at getyournewview.com to get started.